Hello, my name is Jacob Hawkins, and today I will be presenting Khorloogiin Choibalsan, the Stalin of Mongolia. Beginnings. Khorloogiin was born in 1895 as the youngest of four to a herdswoman in Dornod, Mongolia. He never really knew his father, and his mother constantly nagged him to become a monk. At the age of 13, Khorloogiin joined Sunbaisan Kori, a local monastery where he trained to become a monk and received his religious name Choibalsan. Eventually, he fled to a neighboring town, where he worked a variety of different jobs. A monk named Nikolai Donikov enrolled Khorloogiin at a Mongolian Russian translator school. Soon enough, he was sent to study at a gym in Irkutsk, Russia. In 1917 through 1918, he was exposed to communism for the first time during the Russian Revolution, embracing their beliefs and returning to Mongolia to join the Khorloogiin resistance group as the main Russian translator. Prominence. After joining the Mongolian People's Party, Khorloogiin and six others traveled to Irkutsk to rally support from the Soviets. They stayed in the Soviet Union for 6 months for military training before being reassigned to Kayata. In Kayata, Khorloogiin recruited and strategized with the Russians, who now endorsed the Mongolian People's Party. Khorloogiin regularly made trips into China to coordinate with Chinese rebels and smuggle family members of his fellow fighters to Russian cities. In March 1921, at the Mongolian People's Party's first ever Congress, Khorloogiin was chosen as a member of the revolutionary government and deputy chief of the Mongolian People's Party. In the middle of 1921, he commanded a small detachment in a campaign to the west of Mongolia. After this campaign was over, he was given the title chairman of the Mongolian Revolutionary Youth League. Khorloogiin married a seamstress named Borotologai in 1921. In 1923, he was sent to Moscow for further training, and in 1924, he was made commander of the People's Revolutionary Forces. Continuation of prominence. In 1924 through 1928, Khorloogiin was a member of the Presidium of the State Great, and in 1929, he was chosen as head of state. As head of state, he persecuted the Buddhists and enacted collectivization policies. Khorloogiin's policies likely caused the murder and destruction of 30,000 Mongolian Buddhists. Khorloogiin stepped down as head of state in 1930 to become the Minister of Livestock and Agriculture. In this role, he stole land from their humble farmers and sent them to poorly run collective farms. In 1934, he traveled to Moscow for questioning during the Great Purge, in which Stalin was afraid of Japanese spies in the Mongolian government, a, cl- a claim that was not far off. After his innocence was proven, Stalin ordered him back to Mongolia as their new deputy prime minister. Although the current prime minister was not happy with this, he had to accept it. As a parting gift, Stalin sent 20 vehicles along with them, which he put to good use bribing other politicians. In 1936, he was made Marshal of the Mongolian Armed Forces and the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The Ministry of Internal Affairs was made up of 26% Soviet NKVD personnel. Soon after the seize of power, he got to work clearing out his political opponents. In August 1937, after Marshal Timid died, he was made Commander-in-Chief of the Mongolian military and the Minister of Defense. In this role, he goes on to massacre Buddhists and opponents alike, and welcomes 30,000 Soviet troops into Mongolia. It is guessed that about 17,000 llamas were executed for counter-revolutionary activities. And no, not the animal. Mongolian propaganda. The first depiction of propaganda occurs in a setting where the Buddhist temple is being destroyed by the Mongolian army and Buddhists are being massacred. The second depiction of Mongolian propaganda depicts the Mongolian army destroying the Buddhists, who are displayed as evil and cowardly. The third depiction of anti-Buddhist propaganda depicts a larger-than-life Mongolian soldier rescuing a Mongolian citizen from a green, larger-than-life Buddhist. War. In August 1938 and January 1939, Khorloogiin traveled to Moscow to meet with Joseph Stalin. After returning to Mongolia, he arrested Prime Minister Amar and assumed power as the head of government. After becoming head of government in 1939, Khorloogiin faced uncertainty over the Sino-Japanese conflict and the borders crisis between Russia and Manchuria, a Japanese puppet. Though he had a crisis at hand, he stuck to his loyalty with Stalin and did all in his power to help the war effort, like increasing the cattle population to 200 million to supply food and leather to the Soviet army, as well as sending his armies to help secure the Japanese-Soviet border. In his quest to make Mongolia a successful part of the Soviet Union, he adopted the Cyrillic alphabet, abandoning the traditional Mongolian script. On the 10th of August 1945, the Mongolian People's Republic declared war on the Empire of Japan. Khorloogiin amassed his troops on the border of China proper and sent a message to the ethnic Mongolians in the region to rise up. This order was soon condemned by Stalin, who would ally with China later in 14th of August 1945. The Mongolian troops next entered Manchuria and Inner Mongolia. By the end of the war, Mongolian troops had advanced past the Great Wall. In May through September 1939, Mongolian and Soviet troops won against the Japanese in 3 consecutive battles. The Japanese attacked 3 separate times to test the Soviets' resolve. This event helped Khorloogiin's image by portraying him as a defender of Mongolia and a patriot. While the Soviets were fighting the Nazis, Khorloogiin provided funding for a tank regiment and a fighter squadron. He also traveled to Moscow to present gifts to Soviet soldiers and improve their morale. Once peace talks started, Khorloogiin's main goal was to achieve international recognition and control over Inner Mongolia and other bordering regions that had ethnic Mongolians in them. When Khorloogiin realized Stalin did not support reunification, the relationship deteriorated, and Stalin, who was once viewed as a hero by Khorloogiin, now despised him. In 1942, the Choibalsan University opened, proving that development took place in Mongolia during wartime. Khorloogiin funded rebels in the Xinjiang province of China. Khorloogiin embarked on a 5-year plan to improve Mongolia's transportation, mining, education, and agriculture. Post-war era. Khorloogiin embarked on a 5-year plan to improve Mongolia's transportation, mining, education, and agriculture. In June of 1946, Mongolia made its first of many requests to join the UN, which was denied. In 1949, the Communist China won the Civil War, and Khorloogiin made sure that Mongolia was the first nation in the Soviet Union to recognize the People's Republic of China. Because of his good relations with China, he was able to decrease Mongolia's military spending from 33% of the national budget in 1948 to 15% in 1952. Khorloogiin established relations with North Korea, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, India, and Czechoslovakia. In the late 50s, Khorloogiin started purges against mostly political rivals and religious groups. Although these purges were small in scale, they still were bloody. On one purge, he faked an assassination attempt on himself, then arrested any of his opponents, 42 of which would be sentenced to death. In 1952, the Republic of China, Taiwan, declared that the Soviet Union broke the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship and Alliance and provided aid to the Communist Chinese in the Chinese Civil War. On the 1st of February 1952, the United Nations set in place Resolution 505, allowing China to renounce the treaty. Thus, in the eyes of China, Mongolia was no longer a sovereign nation. Khorloogiin supposedly died of kidney cancer in Moscow in 1952, but it is speculated that the NKVD poisoned him because he lost favor with Stalin. After effects. The collectivization of livestock herding was completed in the 1950s. The Trans-Mongolian Railway was completed in 1955. In 1960, the Mongolians and Chinese signed a treaty of mutual agreement, which lasted until the Soviet-Chinese relations soured. In 1960, the Mongolians adopted a third constitution, which started the transition into a modern agricultural society. Televised broadcasting started in 1967. In 1971, satellite communications were incorporated. And in 1971, Mongolia and the Soviet Union agreed to start a copper mining joint venture, as well as Mongolia opening the Zhuun Bayan petroleum factory. This copper mine and petroleum factory played a key role in the development of Mongolia's infrastructure and exports. Overall, Khorloogiin Choibalsan, although Khorloogiin was a hero and a villain in the people's eyes, he was a loyal patriot and improved many of Mongolia's civil services, but he also massacred many religious groups and suppressed protests. Overall, Khorloogiin Choibalsan had a lust for power and craving for blood, but he improved the architecture, rail system development, and healthcare of Mongolia. Motivations. Khorloogiin Choibalsan's motivations are unknown, but likely it all adds up to lust for power and control. His mother dominated his youth, and he held no control over what his future would look like. Once he escaped the monastery he was sent to by his mother, he felt he was given freedom, and he did all in his control to not have to return to that life. Ironically, that's exactly what he would do. In his blind scavenge for control, he became the one being controlled, a pawn on Stalin's chessboard. Now some fun facts about Khorloogiin Choibalsan. In 1929, he started an affair with an actress named Diwa that later caused him to get a divorce with his first wife. The resistance group he joined, named Consulate Dinge, translates to Con- Consulate Dinge. Khorloogiin was a heavy drinker, womanizer, and had a violent temperament, and his wife still stayed with him. After he was arrested in Moscow for interrogation, he gladly aided in the interrogation and torture of accused Mongolians that were likely innocent. Khorloogiin was mad at Stalin for not supporting him in his goals of unifying Mongolia, so he refused to attend Stalin's 70th birthday. A little petty, if you ask me. He adopted the son of one of his Interior Ministry subordinates, but it is likely that that he adopted him so he wouldn't have to come out about saying that the kid was actually his, but not his wife's. Here are my sources. I used Britannica, Box Images, um, the Stalin Steppe, uh, a Mongolian travel magazine, and um, the Wilson Center Digital Archive. Unnecessary explosion, ocean. Doge, Doge.